The morning sun cast long shadows across Atlanta International Airport's pristine grounds as a gleaming black Range Rover pulled up to the main terminal. Inside, the Thompson family was getting ready for what should have been just another trip to Paris, something they'd done countless times since Dr. Andrew Thompson's medical practice had taken off 10 years ago. "Did you double-check your passport this time?" Michelle Thompson asked her husband playfully, adjusting her silk scarf. She couldn't help but tease him about the one time he'd almost forgotten it during their trip to Tokyo. Andrew rolled his eyes and patted his jacket pocket with a knowing smile. Their two teenagers were in the back, busy with their phones but still managing to look picture-perfect in their casual but clearly expensive travel outfits. The family had mastered the art of comfortable luxury. Designer sneakers paired with tailored travel wear that spoke of wealth without screaming it. As the valet approached their car, you could see the slight double take he did, not because of their appearance, but because he recognized Dr. Thompson from the massive billboard downtown advertising their family's medical center. The Thompson Family Medical Center had become a landmark in Atlanta, known for treating everyone from celebrities to locals who couldn't afford care elsewhere. "Good morning, Dr. Thompson," the valet said warmly, opening the door for Michelle. "Taking the jet out today?" Andrew nodded, helping his wife out while their kids climbed out the other side. "Paris for a week. My wife's been craving authentic croissants." He winked at Michelle, who playfully swatted his arm. Their designer luggage was quickly arranged on a cart, and the family made their way through the terminal's sliding doors. They needed to stop by the private aviation office to handle some last-minute paperwork, a routine they'd done dozens of times before. The terminal was busy that morning, filled with the usual mix of stressed travelers and rushing business people. The Thompsons moved through the crowd with easy confidence, their steps in sync from years of traveling together. Their son was telling them about his latest science project, something about renewable energy that had caught the attention of his teachers, while their daughter was already planning their first stop in Paris. What made the Thompsons stand out wasn't their designer clothes or the way they carried themselves. It was how they treated everyone around them. Andrew held the door for an elderly couple struggling with their bags. Michelle stopped to help a young mom pick up the toys her toddler had scattered across the floor. These weren't calculated gestures. They were just who they were. As they approached the private aviation section of the terminal, Michelle was checking their itinerary on her phone. "We should be in Paris just in time for dinner," she said, already thinking about their favorite little restaurant near the Eiffel Tower. "I made reservations at that place you love, the one with the amazing coq au vin." They were just about to turn down the corridor leading to the private aviation offices when someone's voice cut through the general airport buzz, sharp, demanding, and completely unexpected. None of them could have guessed that their routine morning was about to become anything but ordinary. The family moved with the kind of ease that comes from success earned through hard work rather than inherited privilege. Each of them carried themselves with dignity but remained approachable, a trait that had made their medical center so successful. Their conversations were sprinkled with inside jokes and gentle teasing, showing a family unit strengthened by love and mutual respect. Little did they know that in just a few moments, their ordinary day would turn into something that would test their patience, challenge their dignity, and ultimately show the world what grace under pressure truly looks like. Just as the Thompson family was walking past the regular terminal gates, a woman wearing a designer knockoff handbag and a sour expression stormed up to them. She had that look, you know the one, where someone's already made up their mind about you before even saying hello. Her heels clicked aggressively against the airport floor as she approached. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough to make nearby travelers turn their heads. "You people need to get in the regular security line. The private aviation area is for authorized personnel only." Her perfectly manicured finger pointed back toward the main terminal, where hundreds of passengers were queuing up for regular flights. Dr. Andrew Thompson, who had just finished texting their pilot about departure times, looked up with mild surprise. His wife Michelle instinctively moved closer to their children, not out of fear, but protective instinct. Their kids exchanged knowing glances. They'd seen this movie before. "Ma'am," Andrew began politely, his voice carrying the same calm tone he used with nervous patients. "We're exactly where we need to be. But thank you for your concern." He tried to guide his family around her, but she shifted to block their path. "I worked here," she lied, her badgeless outfit making it obvious she didn't. "And I know for a fact that you're in the wrong section." Her voice got louder with each word, drawing even more attention. Some passengers had already pulled out their phones, sensing the drama unfolding. Michelle, still keeping her composure, stepped forward. "We appreciate your interest," she said diplomatically, "but we're actually heading to our private hangar. Now, if you'll excuse us." The woman's eyes widened, and she let out a laugh that bounced off the terminal walls. "Your private hangar? Right, and I'm the Queen of England." She turned to some nearby passengers, seeking allies. "Can you believe this?" The Thompson kids, who had been raised to handle difficult situations with grace, stayed quiet but started recording discreetly on their phones. They'd learned from their parents that sometimes the best response to ignorance was to document it calmly. "Listen," the woman continued, her voice dripping with condescension, "I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassment. This area is for people who own private jets." She emphasized the words as if explaining something to children. A small crowd had gathered now, most watching uncomfortably as the scene unfolded. A few business travelers who regularly used the private aviation terminal recognized the Thompsons and shook their heads in disbelief at the woman's behavior. Andrew checked his watch. They were still on schedule, but this unnecessary delay was starting to eat into their buffer time. He dealt with skeptical patients, worried families, and high-pressure surgeries, but something about this woman's determined ignorance was testing his usually endless patience. Their daughter whispered something to her mother about their dinner reservations in Paris, and the woman latched onto it like a hawk. "Paris? On a private jet?" Her voice rose another octave. "Okay, that's it. I'm calling security." She pulled out her phone and made a show of dialing, speaking loudly into it. "Yes, security? We have a situation at the private aviation entrance. Some people are trying to access restricted areas." The Thompsons remained remarkably composed, though you could see the slight tension in Andrew's jaw and the way Michelle's hand tightened around her handbag strap. They'd worked too hard and achieved too much to let someone's prejudices ruin their family trip. As the woman demanded to see their documentation, boarding passes, and ID, none of which she had any authority to request, other travelers began whispering among themselves. Some were filming, others looking embarrassed on behalf of the increasingly aggressive woman. Little did this self-appointed airport authority know that she was about to learn a very public lesson about making assumptions. The security officer who would soon arrive wasn't going to react quite the way she expected, and her attempt to humiliate the Thompson family was about to backfire spectacularly. The situation was getting out of hand faster than a winter flu in a kindergarten classroom. As the woman continued her tirade, more passengers gathered around, creating an impromptu audience to this unfortunate display of prejudice. Dr. Andrew Thompson stood tall, his calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the woman's growing hysteria. "I've already called security," the woman announced triumphantly, clutching her phone like a trophy. "They'll sort this out real quick." She kept glancing at the growing crowd, clearly enjoying her moment in the spotlight. What she didn't notice was how many of those onlookers were shaking their heads in disapproval. At her, not the Thompsons. The Thompson kids were handling the situation with remarkable poise. Their son, adjusting his glasses, continued recording while pretending to text, a skill today's teenagers have mastered. Their daughter maintained her composure, though you could see her knuckles whitening as she gripped the strap of her designer backpack. "Ma'am," Dr. Thompson tried one more time, his voice steady and professional. "I understand you think you're doing your job, but you're not actually employed here, are you?" The question hung in the air like morning fog, making the woman's face turn an interesting shade of red. Michelle Thompson stepped forward, her medical ID badge from their hospital still hanging around her neck from their morning rounds. "We really need to proceed to our gate," she said firmly. "We have a schedule to keep." But the woman wasn't having it. "Oh, sure you do. A schedule for Paris," she mocked, making air quotes with her fingers. "In your private jet." More air quotes. A few teenagers in the crowd cringed at her behavior. Even they knew this was way out of line. Just then, the woman's eyes landed on the Thompsons' luggage, specifically the subtle designer brands and custom tags. For a split second, doubt flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it with more bravado. "Those bags are probably fake anyway," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. An elderly couple who had been watching the scene unfold finally spoke up. "We know the Thompsons," the gentleman said kindly. "They operated on our grandson last year. They're—" "Oh, so you're all in on this?" the woman interrupted, throwing her hands up dramatically. "This is ridiculous. I'm protecting this airport's security." Her voice had reached a pitch that probably had dogs in the nearby pet relief area howling. The Thompson kids exchanged glances. Their mom had always taught them that sometimes the biggest statement you can make is staying silent when others lose their cool. Right now, they were giving a master class in that lesson. Dr. Thompson checked his watch again. They were now officially running late for their pre-flight checklist. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Hey Tom," he said to their pilot, "we might be a few minutes late. We're dealing with an interesting situation at the terminal." This only seemed to fuel the woman's indignation. "Now you're pretending to call your pilot. This is just too much." She started pacing in small circles, her heels click-clacking against the floor like an angry metronome. The crowd had grown larger, with some people openly filming now. A few were whispering about recognizing the Thompsons from their hospital's billboards or from charity events in the city. The woman seemed oblivious to these murmurs, too caught up in her self-appointed role as airport gatekeeper. Security was taking their sweet time arriving, and the tension in the air was thicker than Atlanta humidity in August. The Thompson family stood together, a picture of unity and dignity in the face of ignorance. Their body language spoke volumes, backs straight, expressions neutral, hands relaxed. They'd faced challenging situations in the operating room. This was just another test of their patience. The woman's rant had now evolved into a full-blown conspiracy theory about how people like them couldn't possibly afford private travel. Each word she spoke was digging her hole deeper, and soon she'd find out just how wrong her assumptions were. The security officer who was about to arrive would change everything, but not in the way she expected. The sound of quick footsteps echoing through the terminal announced the arrival of airport security. Officer Robert Chen approached the scene, his face showing he'd seen his fair share of airport drama. But what happened next wasn't anything like what the confrontational woman had expected. "Dr. Thompson." Officer Chen's professional expression melted into a warm smile. "I didn't know you were flying out today." He stepped forward, completely ignoring the woman who was now frantically waving her arms to get his attention. "Officer Chen," Dr. Thompson nodded warmly. "How's your mother doing? That hip replacement holding up okay?" The woman's jaw dropped so fast you could almost hear it hit the floor. Her eyes darted between the security officer and the Thompson family like she was watching a tennis match in fast forward. "She's doing great, Doc. Back to her morning walks and everything. She won't stop telling everyone about how you squeezed her into your schedule when no other surgeon would take her case." Officer Chen beamed, then turned to Michelle. "And Dr. Michelle, the nurses in pediatrics still talk about that miracle surgery you performed last month." The woman who had caused all the commotion stood frozen, her face cycling through various shades of red. But I called about suspicious people trying to access restricted areas," she sputtered. Officer Chen's expression turned serious as he faced her. "Ma'am, Do you work at this airport? His tone made it clear he already knew the answer. Well, I was just trying to help with security, she stammered, her earlier confidence evaporating like morning dew in the Georgia sun. Some of the onlookers were trying to hide their smiles. Others were still recording, probably already thinking about their social media captions. The Thompson kids maintained their composure, though their son couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at the woman's sudden change in attitude. Ma'am, Officer Chen continued professionally, not only are you harassing one of Atlanta's most respected medical families, but you're also interfering with airport operations. The Thompsons have their own private hangar here. They perform life-saving surgeries and run one of the largest charitable medical foundations in the state. The woman's designer knockoff bag slipped from her shoulder, and she scrambled to catch it. I didn't know, she mumbled, but the excuse sounded weak even to her own ears. A young nurse who happened to be passing by stopped short. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Michelle. Oh my gosh, you saved my cousin's life last year. We were told no one could do that surgery, but you both. The woman looked like she wanted the terminal floor to open up and swallow her whole. The crowd had grown larger, and now multiple people were sharing their own stories about the Thompson family's medical work. Remember when they turned their private hangar into a temporary medical facility during last year's storm? Someone in the crowd mentioned. Their foundation paid for my daughter's cancer treatment when our insurance wouldn't cover it, another voice added. Officer Chen turned back to the Thompsons. Would you like to press any charges, Dr. Thompson? Dr. Thompson shared a quick look with his wife, then shook his head. No need, Officer Chen. I think this has been educational for everyone involved. The grace in his voice made the woman shrink even further into herself. Michelle stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Perhaps we can all learn something here about making assumptions. She wasn't angry. If anything, she sounded tired. The kind of tired that comes from dealing with these situations too many times before. Officer Chen nodded and turned to the woman. Ma'am, I'll need to escort you out of the terminal. And in the future, please remember that actual airport security personnel wear badges. He gestured toward the exit. As Officer Chen led the woman away, she kept looking back over her shoulder, her face a mix of embarrassment and regret. The crowd slowly began to disperse, many stopping to shake the Thompsons' hands or share quick words of support. The family's pilot appeared at the end of the terminal, giving them a quick wave. It was time to head to their hangar, leaving behind a story that would surely make its rounds on social media before they even reached cruising altitude over the Atlantic. The private hangar area was a whole different world compared to the main terminal. As the Thompson family walked through the secure doors, the woman, who had apparently convinced Officer Chen to let her apologize properly, followed at a respectful distance. Her entire demeanor had changed, like a balloon slowly losing its air. The morning sun streamed through the massive hangar windows, and there it was, the Thompson family's pride and joy. Their Gulfstream G650 stood gleaming in the sunlight, its pristine white paint job making it look like it had just rolled off the assembly line. The gold letters on the tail spelled out Thompson Family Medical Foundation in elegant script, with their foundation's logo, two hands forming a heart, beneath it. The woman stopped dead in her tracks. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. She looked like someone had just told her the earth was actually flat and had proof to back it up. That's yours. She finally managed to squeak out, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were fixed on the multi-million-dollar aircraft as the ground crew bustled around it, preparing for takeoff. Dr. Thompson nodded casually while checking some pre-flight paperwork. We use it for medical emergencies too. Last month, we flew to 3 different states for emergency surgeries. He spoke without pride or boasting, just stating facts, like mentioning the weather. The family's pilot approached, tablet in hand. Morning, doctors. Kids. Weather looks great, all the way to Paris. should be a smooth flight. He nodded professionally at the family before heading back to complete his pre-flight checks. Michelle Thompson turned to the woman, whose eyes were still as wide as dinner plates. You see, she began gently, success doesn't look like any one thing. It doesn't have a specific face or color. It's built on hard work, dedication, and treating everyone with respect, even those who don't immediately show you the same courtesy. Their daughter was already climbing the stairs to the jet, followed by their son, who was explaining to the co-pilot about a new flight simulation program he'd been studying. The kids had moved past the terminal drama, ready for their Paris adventure. The hangar staff moved around them efficiently, loading their luggage and preparing for departure. Each worker greeted the Thompsons by name. This wasn't just a wealthy family showing off. These were people who had built relationships with everyone they encountered. We've had this hangar for 5 years now, Dr. Thompson explained, his voice kind despite everything that had happened. Every third weekend, we use it to host mobile medical clinics for families who can't afford regular care. Sometimes the assumptions people make say more about their own limitations than anyone else's. The woman's designer knockoff bag hung limply at her side as she watched a ground crew member drive up in a luxury car. Another Thompson family vehicle that would be parked in their private garage until they returned. I don't know what to say, she stammered, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. I made such horrible assumptions. I just never thought. That's exactly the point, Michelle said softly. We try not to react to situations like this with anger, because it only continues the cycle. Instead, we hope each interaction like this changes perspectives, even if just a little bit. Through the hangar windows, they could see Officer Chen waiting patiently to escort the woman out. The Thompson's jet engine began its pre-start sequence, the sound echoing through the hangar like a reminder that time was moving forward. Perhaps, Dr. Thompson suggested, checking his watch, the next time you see someone who doesn't fit your idea of what success looks like, you'll remember this moment. He spoke without judgment, like a teacher hoping a lesson would stick. The woman nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. As she turned to leave with Officer Chen, she watched the Thompson family climb the stairs to their private jet with the same grace and dignity they'd shown throughout the entire ordeal. The morning sun caught the gold lettering on their jet one more time, seemed to emphasize every word of their foundation's name. A permanent reminder that success comes in many forms, and prejudice often blinds us to the remarkable people right in front of us. Before boarding their jet, Dr. Michelle Thompson felt a gentle tug at her heart, the kind that usually led to some of her most meaningful teaching moments. She turned to face the woman who was still standing there, visibly shaken by the whole experience. Would you like to understand why this matters so much? Michelle asked softly. The morning sun streaming through the hangar windows created a warm, almost classroom-like atmosphere. The woman nodded, clutching her bag like a shield. The ground crew paused their work, sensing something important was about to happen. Even the Thompson kids stopped on the jet stairs, turning to watch their mother. They'd seen this before. Their mom had a way of turning difficult moments into powerful lessons. 20 years ago, Michelle began, her voice clear and steady. My husband and I were medical students. We'd park our beat-up car far from the hospital because we were embarrassed by how it looked. She smiled at the memory. People made assumptions about us back then, too. The woman shifted uncomfortably, but Michelle continued. One day, a patient refused to let me assist in their care. Not because of my credentials, but because of how I looked. The attending physician that day didn't just dismiss the situation. He turned it into a teaching moment for everyone present. Dr. Thompson joined his wife, their shoulders barely touching. That doctor later became our mentor, he added. He taught us that the best response to prejudice isn't anger, it's education. Their daughter called down from the jet stairs. Tell her about the scholarship program, Mom. The pride in her voice was unmistakable. Michelle's eyes lit up. Every year, our foundation provides scholarships to 50 medical students who faced similar prejudices. We don't just give them money, We give them a chance to prove every doubt wrong, just like we did. The woman's eyes welled up with tears. I never thought. I just assumed. That's exactly it, Dr. Thompson said gently. Assumptions are like walls we build around our understanding. Sometimes they need to come down for us to see clearly. A ground crew member stepped forward. When my son got sick last year, he shared, the Thompsons didn't just treat him. They made sure I could take time off without losing my job. They don't just talk about making a difference, they live it. Michelle reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. Our foundation hosts monthly community discussions about breaking down prejudices in healthcare. Maybe you'd like to join us? Share your perspective on how assumptions can cloud our judgment. The woman took the card with trembling hands. You're inviting me? After how I behaved. Growth starts with acknowledging our mistakes, Dr. Thompson explained. We've seen it countless times in our work. Sometimes the most powerful advocates for change are people who've had their own perspectives completely transformed. Their son added from the stairs, Mom always says that bridges are better than barriers. His sister rolled her eyes at his cheesy contribution, but she was smiling too. The woman looked at the card, then at the jet with its foundation logo, and finally at the Thompson family. I'll come, she said quietly. I need to do better. Be better. Officer Chen, who had been waiting patiently nearby, stepped forward. I'll make sure she gets the information about next month's meeting, he offered, having attended several himself. As the woman turned to leave with Officer Chen, Michelle called out one last thing. Remember, it's not about feeling guilty. It's about growing. We all have room to learn and improve. The family finally boarded their jet, but not before several ground crew members shared quick fist bumps with the Thompson kids, a regular part of their departure routine. The woman watched as the family that she had so quickly judged demonstrated what real class looked like. The jet's engines hummed to life, a sound that now seemed to echo the day's lesson. Success comes in many forms, and true greatness lies not in what you own, but in how you treat others along the way. Later that evening, as the Thompson family's jet cruised somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, their encounter at the airport was becoming the talk of the internet. The Thompson kids' phones kept buzzing with notifications, even at 35,000 feet. Mom, you've got to see this, their daughter said, holding up her phone. The videos from the airport are everywhere. People are calling it Private Jet Karen Gets Schooled on Assumptions. She scrolled through countless shares and supportive comments. Dr. Thompson looked up from his medical journal. Had they identified the woman? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Despite everything, he didn't want this incident to ruin someone's life. That's the interesting part, their son chimed in, adjusting his gaming headset. Everyone who posted the videos followed your example. They're focused on the lesson, not the person. The comments are all about breaking down stereotypes and treating people with respect. Michelle smiled as she read some of the comments people were leaving. Those kids stayed so calm. Their parents raised them right. When she saw that private jet, I felt that shock through my screen. The way they handled it with class instead of anger. The family's pilot called from the cockpit. Doctors, you might want to see this. Your foundation's website is getting flooded with donations and volunteer applications. He passed back his tablet, showing their foundation's dashboard. A news outlet had picked up the story, but instead of focusing on the confrontation, they'd highlighted the Thompson Family Medical Foundation's work in the community. The headline read, Airport Incident Shines Light on Medical Foundation's Impact on Atlanta Healthcare. Their daughter read from her phone. Listen to this comment. I was there. The best part wasn't the private jet reveal. It was how this family turned a horrible situation into a teaching moment. They even invited the woman to learn more about their foundation's work. Social media channels were filling up with stories from people who'd been helped by the Thompson family over the years. Dr. T did my surgery when no one else would take my case. Never asked about money, just wanted to help. Their foundation paid for my mom's treatment. They don't just talk about helping, they do it. Their kids volunteered at my daughter's school, teaching about medical careers, role models. Michelle watched as more positive messages poured in. Well, she said with a gentle smile, seems like this incident might help more people than we thought. Their son pulled up another post. Look at this. Someone started a hashtag Be the Bridge and Not Barrier. It's trending. He showed them how people were using it to share their own stories of overcoming prejudice and breaking down assumptions. The flight attendant, who had worked with the family for years, brought over some hot chocolate. The ground crew sent me the full video, she said, smiling. My daughter's using it for her social studies project on breaking down stereotypes. As they flew through the night, the story continued to spread, but not in the way most viral airport confrontations do. There was no angry mob, no calls for revenge. Instead, people were sharing resources about unconscious bias, promoting the foundation's work, and discussing how to be better. The Thompson kids started brainstorming ideas for their foundation's next youth program. Maybe we could do something about teaching kids not to jump to conclusions. Their daughter suggested, inspired by the day's events. And we could use the private jet hangar for a science fair, her brother added excitedly. Show kids that success can look different for everyone. Michelle and Andrew shared a knowing look. Even at their young age, their children were learning to turn challenging moments into opportunities for positive change. As Paris got closer with each passing minute, thousands of people back home were learning an unexpected lesson about assumptions, grace, and the power of responding to ignorance with education rather than anger. The incident that was meant to humiliate had instead inspired a wave of positive change. What started as an unpleasant confrontation at an airport was transforming into something much more meaningful. A viral moment that actually made the world a little bit better. 3 days into their Paris vacation, the Thompson family was enjoying breakfast at a charming sidewalk cafe when their phones started buzzing simultaneously. Their foundation's social media manager had sent them all the same link, a video that was quickly going viral. The screen showed the woman from the airport incident, sitting in what looked like her home office. Gone was the aggressive attitude and designer knockoff bag. Instead, she appeared humble, her eyes showing signs of sleepless nights and serious reflection. I need to address what happened at Atlanta International Airport, she began, her voice slightly shaky but determined. By now, many of you have seen the videos of me confronting the Thompson family. The Thompson kids paused their croissant battle to watch, genuinely curious about this unexpected development. Their father lowered his coffee cup, and their mother leaned in closer to hear better. What I did was wrong on every level, the woman continued. But what happened next changed my life. Instead of responding to my ignorance with anger, the Thompsons showed me grace I didn't deserve. She went on to explain how the incident forced her to confront her own biases. I've spent the last 3 days reading about the Thompson Family Medical Foundation. They've helped thousands of people, regardless of background. And there I was, trying to tell them they didn't belong. The cafe waiter, who noticed their intense focus on the phone screen, brought them fresh coffee without being asked. The morning sun cast a warm glow over their table as they continued watching. Yesterday, I'd enrolled in a diversity and inclusion program at my workplace, the woman revealed. I also signed up for the Foundation's community outreach program. My employers saw the video too, and instead of firing me, they're using this as a learning opportunity for all staff. Their daughter whispered, "Mom, look at the comments on her video. People are actually supporting her for admitting she was wrong." Indeed, the comments section was filled with positive messages, praising her courage to publicly acknowledge her mistakes. The woman's voice cracked slightly as she continued, "To the Thompson family, if you see this, thank you. Thank you for showing me that true class isn't about what you own or how you look. It's about how you treat others, especially when they don't treat you well." Dr. Thompson smiled softly. "This is exactly why we handle things the way we do," he said to his family. Real change happens when people have the space to learn and grow. The video continued with the woman sharing how she discovered that her own daughter wanted to be a doctor, but had been afraid to tell her because doctors don't look like us, a belief she now realized she had unconsciously reinforced. "I've never been more wrong about anything in my life," she admitted. "And I've never been more grateful for being wrong." My daughter and I are attending the Foundation's next medical career workshop together. Michelle wiped a tear from her eye, trying to play it off as croissant flakes. Their son, typically glued to his gaming apps, was fully engaged in the video, nodding approvingly. The woman ended her video with a challenge. "If you've ever made assumptions about people like I did, join me in doing better." The Thompsons showed me that bridges of understanding are built one conversation at a time. As the video ended, their phones lit up again. Their foundation's website was experiencing record traffic. People were signing up for volunteering, making donations, and sharing their own stories of transformed perspectives. The family sat in thoughtful silence for a moment, the busy Paris street life buzzing around them. Finally, their daughter spoke up. "So, does this mean she's coming to the next Foundation Gala?" Michelle and Andrew exchanged knowing looks. "Well," Michelle said, picking up her coffee cup, "everyone deserves a chance to rewrite their story. Even airport Karens." The family laughed, and just like that, what could have been just another viral moment of public shaming had transformed into something much more powerful. A story of genuine change and growing understanding. 1 month later, the Thompson Family Medical Foundation's annual charity gala transformed the same private hangar where the airport incident had occurred. The space gleamed with elegant decorations, the foundation's heart-shaped logo projected onto one wall. Their private jet had been moved to one side, now serving as a stunning backdrop for an evening of celebration and change. The woman from the airport incident, now known to everyone as Linda, stood nervously near the entrance. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress, holding a small clutch instead of her former knockoff designer bag. Her daughter stood beside her, beaming with pride in her new white doctor's coat from the Foundation's junior medical program. "Ready?" Dr. Thompson asked, approaching them with his signature warm smile. Linda nodded, taking a deep breath. She was tonight's surprise speaker, though most guests had already seen her viral apology video. The hangar filled with an interesting mix of people: medical professionals, community leaders, Foundation volunteers, and families who'd been helped by the Thompsons over the years. The Thompson kids circulated through the crowd, confidently sharing stories about their Foundation's latest projects. Linda stepped up to the podium, her hands slightly shaking. The same space where she had once made terrible assumptions was now where she would share her story of transformation. "A month ago, I stood in this very hangar," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I was a very different person then. I thought I knew what success looked like, what a doctor should look like, what belonging looked like. I've never been more wrong in my life." The crowd listened intently as she continued. "That day, the Thompsons could have had me arrested. Instead, they invited me to learn. They could have exposed my identity online. Instead, they protected it. They could have responded to hate with hate. Instead, they showed me what true class looks like." Michelle Thompson watched from the side, remembering their Paris breakfast when they'd first seen Linda's apology video. Her kids had already adopted Linda's daughter as their junior medical mentor student, teaching her everything they knew about their parents' work. Since that day, Linda shared, "I've completed 3 diversity training programs. I've volunteered at 4 mobile medical clinics. I've watched my daughter discover her dream of becoming a doctor, something I might have discouraged a month ago." Her voice cracked slightly. "But most importantly, I've learned that assumptions are just limitations we place on ourselves and others." The Thompsons' jet gleamed behind her, no longer a symbol of privilege, but a reminder of how the Foundation reached communities in need. The ground crew who had witnessed the original incident were now part of the gala's volunteer team, wearing proud smiles. The foundation didn't just forgive my behavior, Linda continued. They showed me how to grow from it. Dr. Thompson and Dr. Michelle didn't just prove me wrong. They showed me how to be better. She gestured to various people in the crowd. That's Mr. Wilson, whose heart surgery I helped coordinate last week. That's Mrs. Chen, whose granddaughter I now mentor in the Foundation's youth program. That's Officer Robert, who's teaching me about community outreach. The Thompson kids nudged each other, grinning. Their mom's bridges not barriers philosophy had worked yet again. Linda's daughter stood straighter in her white coat as her mother concluded. Sometimes life gives you a chance to rewrite your story. The Thompsons didn't just rewrite mine. They showed me how to help others rewrite theirs too. The applause that followed wasn't just for Linda's speech. It was for every person who'd ever grown beyond their prejudices, for every bridge built where barriers once stood. As the evening continued, the hangar that had once witnessed confrontation now hosted connections. Linda's daughter excitedly discussed medical school plans with Dr. Thompson. The Foundation announced new programs for breaking down healthcare barriers. And somewhere in the crowd, another person's assumptions were being gently challenged and changed. The night ended with the Thompson family and Linda's family taking a photo together in front of the jet. Not as a symbol of wealth, but as a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful journeys aren't the ones that take you to Paris, but the ones that lead you to understanding.